History in Manhattan this week as closing arguments in former President Donald Trump's hush money trial are set to start off on Tuesday.
It's the first time a former president has faced criminal charges, but it's not the last. Trump faces 3 more cases and dozens of felony counts.
I heard a little bit about the Manhattan case and more is Kimberly Atkins Stohr, MSNBC political contributor, senior opinion writer at the Boston Globe, and member of the Sisters-in-Law podcast, which is coming to Boston this week. Kimberly, first let's talk a little bit about this Trump trial. You've been following it closely. Guessing what this jury is going to do is a bit of a moving target, but what is your takeaway from the weeks of testimony that we've heard?
Based on what we've seen so far, I think the prosecution has put on a case that hits all the elements of this crime. Just a reminder of what this crime is, I like to describe it as one that involves both a crime and a cover-up, the crime being paying of hush money payments during a campaign designed to keep negative information out of the press and out of the grasps of potential voters. And then the cover-up is the falsification of business records as to how that money was paid. Seems that the prosecution made that case. The defense called only a couple of witnesses, neither of which strongly refuted it to me. So it's up to the jury, though. You only need one who has reasonable doubt as to any of these charges, and that will hang the jury and prevent a conviction in this case. So the burden is in many ways on the prosecution.
So, Kimberly, I have to use the words we keep using, which we didn't use as often as we do, the unprecedented and not normal, and nothing about this case is normal, and it's all unprecedented. Let's just go down a make-believe lane here. Let's say Trump is acquitted of the charges. Do you think it'll be hard for him to say that the system was rigged against him and that that's what happened, and that may hurt him in the 3 other cases he faces? What are some of the outcomes here, and what do you think Trump will say about it?
Yeah, so Donald Trump has always been someone who has campaigned on grievance and has been fairly successful at it in terms of his own base. I think even if he is acquitted, he's going to say, oh, it was a sham trial and I was total vindication, that he likes to claim. So I think he's going to spin it in some way like that. The problem is, as you pointed out, he still has 3 other trials ahead of him. I don't know if any of those will get to trial before the election, but he still has these charges hanging over his head. He is the first and will remain the first nominee to be under criminal indictment at the same time. And that still is going to raise a lot of eyebrows. I think this trial even reminded a lot of people of some of the things Donald Trump was alleged to have done. And I can't believe that has not caused him some political damage in this. And particularly, the other trials remind everyone about January 6th and his connection to that. And that's got to hurt him in some way as well.
I want to talk about the proceedings a little bit. I can't get from my car to my apartment without being on about 15 cameras that are recording me. But there are no cameras in the courtroom to show the American people what's happening in this case. And given some of the graphic testimony that we've heard, of course, involving Stormy Daniels, do you think that if the American public could have actually seen that in real time, that it would have been damaging to Donald Trump?
I think so. And I agree. I think that there should be cameras in the courtroom, not only because this is a big case that affects more people than New Yorkers. This is a presidential candidate, and the voters need to be able to see what he has been accused of and how the witnesses present it for themselves. I also think that by having cameras in the courtroom, it will take away the penchant for some news organizations, particularly cable news organizations, just to run this kind of running commentary in lieu of cameras. They could focus on what the public really needs to know, digest that down, and whatever else the public wants to see, they'd be free to see for themselves. That would be ideal. But yeah, this was less than ideal. We have to go by transcripts that are delayed by a day, or other reporters who are in the room giving a live play-by-play. It's not the best way. And I think that's one reason why for a lot of people that I've talked to, they're not even fully understanding what this trial was about or really the implications of it.
You mentioned the three other cases that he's facing as well, that being the Georgia election interference case, along with the federal election interference case in Washington, D.C., and the classified documents case. Talk us through how those have unfolded. Is this simply just stall tactics from Donald Trump's legal team paying off, or is it just the slow process of our legal system?
I think it's both. The legal system does move more slowly than many people who would have liked. I'm a lawyer, and I also think it moves more slowly than it should. In the Jack Smith case, there was this appeal made by Donald Trump of a claim of absolute immunity or some sort of immunity. And it was actually surprising when the Supreme Court took that up in a way that put the brakes on that case entirely, the January 6th case, making it very unlikely that it will go to trial by the end of the term. So I think that was both Trump stalling as well as the system allowing him to. Similarly, in Georgia, the claim of potential conflict of interest on the part of the DA not only was litigated, but now is being appealed, ensuring that won't go to trial before the election. And in the classified documents case, the judge has sort of put that case entirely on hold for reasons that I still don't understand. This is a case that, although complex, involving national security, it's complex. It was really straightforward, and it was no reason why that couldn't have pushed forward and been one of the first cases to go to trial. So I think you have a combination of both stalling and judicial slowness.
So, of course, any defendant is not required to testify on their own behalf. And former President Trump said he would testify, and then he chose not to. Do you think the American people are going to consider that at all, or care about it, or is just some of this stuff so complex they just want to get to the final verdict?
I think in the end, the Americans want to know what happened. They want the verdict. They want to know whether he is convicted or not. Use that as one of their data points in making their choice. I don't think him testifying would have done him any help, and it certainly could have done him a lot of harm. I think in this case, he listened to the sound judgment of his attorneys, perhaps for once, in not testifying. But he still has the bully pulpit. He's moving into election season. He's doing campaigns, and there will be debates. So he still will have a chance to have his say. But I think in terms of testifying, that would have been legally perilous for him, and he knows it.
Before we let you go, Kimberly, you're part of the Sisters-in-Law podcast. Your crew's coming to Boston this coming Thursday. For folks who aren't familiar, just tell us a little bit about the podcast and why people should be tuning in, seeing it, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so hashtag Sisters-in-Law is hosted by me, as well as Jill Wyden-Banks and Barb McQuaid and Joyce Vance. The four of us break down the legal news just like this Trump case and a lot more. One thing that's been really gratifying, particularly doing live shows where our listeners can come see us, is hearing from people saying that we help them stay sane and we help them make sense of all the legal things that are going on. And for me personally, because I have such a close, wonderful connection to Boston, I'm so excited to be at the Schubert Theater on Thursday. I've seen shows at the Schubert, and I never in a million years thought I'd be on its stage, so I'm thrilled.
And let me tell you, English teachers all around America are thrilled that Sisters-in-Law is helping them to use the plural correctly. So we want to thank you for that, because I know it's always been something my English teachers would beat me about. So there you go. Good job on that front.
Well, Kimberly Atkins Stohr, thanks so much for joining us on that issue. We sure appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.